Hey guys, my name is Joanna, also known as JustAnotherFlutist here on YouTube, and today we are doing yet again another monthly flute review sponsored by the Flute Center of New York. Thank you so much. Before we get into this review, I need to let you guys know about a couple of perks that you can get if you use my code JAF to order a flute from the Flute Center of New York. Number 1, you get free domestic shipping within the US. Number 2, you get an extended 10-day trial, usually it's only 7 days. Number 3, you get an extended 18-month warranty on your new flute. And number 4, you can take up to 3 instruments out on trial at a time. Just to be completely transparent, I do earn a small commission on each flute that is ordered through the Flute Center of New York using my code JAF. Please note that if you take flutes out on trial, you will be charged the shipping costs up front, but it will be refunded back to you once you return those flutes. Also, be sure that you are actually in the market to buy a flute if you take flutes out on trial. The Flute Center of New York does price match other authorized dealers, so you'll always know you're getting the best bang for your buck. Now, if you do want to take flutes out on trial, it's really easy. All you have to do is contact the Flute Center of New York directly, talk to their staff. Their staff are so nice. It's not just because I'm their partner. I have legitimately heard from many other people that their customer service is stellar. I will put a link to their contact page, which has their email and their phone number. You can contact them either way in the info box down below. If you don't want to take flutes out on trial and you already know which flute you want, all you have to do is just straight up order the flute right off of their website. At checkout, use my code JAF to get your free shipping and all of the other perks. When trying flutes, make sure that you take off all rings and dangly jewelry that could potentially scratch the flute. Never use the polishing cloth, the swabbing gauze, or the cleaning rod that comes with each new flute because they are not yours yet. You don't want to get your slobber on the cleaning supplies of a flute that potentially might go to someone else. And lastly, just a quick disclaimer, every flutist plays each flute differently. Like in Harry Potter, just as the wand chooses the wizard, so the flute chooses the flutist. I'm just here to describe to the best of my ability how each of these flutes like to be played, but it is up to you to decide which flute works the best for you. And with all that said and done, let's jump into the review. Today we're going to be reviewing the Jupiter 700WD and 700WE. Before we forget, let's go over the specs of these flutes. The Jupiter 700WD, formerly known as the Prodigy Model 509 Waveline, has plateau keys, which means that they are closed hole keys, Waveline Technology head joints, one-piece body to low D, assisted fingering, silver-plated head joint body, and keys. The 700WE, formerly known as the Prodigy Model 510, also has plateau keys, Waveline Technology head joint, two-piece body to low C, silver-plated head joint body, and keys. I noticed that there was a split E mechanism on the WE as well. These were formerly known as Waveline flutes because of the wave in the head joint. You will also notice that it used to have a different model number associated with it, but just know that the updated model number is 700WD and 700WE. The biggest difference between these two flutes is that one of them can only go down to low D. The body of the WD is actually elongated to accommodate the pinky key that is normally found on the foot joint. And then the rest of the keys of the foot joint are completely missing. You'll also notice that there are no trill keys. They're completely gone. There's not even a B-flat lever. So the WD is made to be as light as possible, as small as possible, while still retaining the same exact tuning system. Like, you can play the same notes as the normal flute. You just can't play as many, so you can't play like low C sharp, low C. B-flat 6 and B natural 6 require you to use trill keys to get them out. Because there are no trill keys, you can use harmonics instead to get them out. You can't use the standard fingerings on the WD. I think you can get a C out though. Let me try. Yeah, you can get a C out, no problem. In fact, ooh, did you hear that? Nice, right? You can't even get a C sharp out even without the rest of those foot joint keys. You can also get a D out. You just can't get B flat and B out. So this flute is really just for beginners with short arms, tiny hands. You'll also notice that the WD has what's called assisted fingering. They're basically key extenders that are placed strategically so that the student does not need to stretch their fingers out like crazy. They can remain at a more natural position. You guys probably can't really tell on camera, but you know, I'm a small Asian lady. If you take a look at all of my other other review videos, my hand posture on the WD is the best out of every single flute I have ever tried. I never let myself use a finger port or a thumb port on any of these new flutes because I'm really scared that I might scratch them or something like that. So I don't put it on, but it does compromise my hand posture on all of these flutes when I try them. But on this one, it doesn't, because everything is like beautifully scrunched in for me. Now, what's the most interesting about the WE is that there's a cutout on the Waveline head joint piece that pops into the body. I was really mystified at first as to like what this cutout was. I was like, why is this there? I've never seen this before in my life. And then I realized that if you pop it in at the wrong angle, it will actually cover up one of the trill key holes. There are two arrows, one on the body and one on that Waveline portion of the head joint, and you have to line them up. Those arrows are not a suggestion. Make sure you line them up. If you do, then that cutout on the head joint piece will very neatly line up with that first trill key tone hole. You won't find the assisted fingering extenders on the WE because the WE is meant for an older student who have bigger hands but maybe not long enough arms. And now let's talk about the packaging. Each flute comes in a case that looks like this. It's very, very heavy duty. There's so much padding inside. There's so much space between each of the joints that go in here. I love that because this flute will mostly be played by young children, and if you space things out a little bit more, it's easier for them to kind of like put it back in. Everything fits in really nicely. You don't have to squeeze parts in or anything like that. You don't have to put it in a particular order. It just pops right in. There's plenty of padding up here as well. Usually there's some sort of like pocket on the outside or something, and I was like, well, where's the cleaning rod and where's the cleaning gauze and where's the polishing cloth, and why the heck is this so freaking heavy? I saw this little loop here and I was like, oh, maybe that's where you store a cleaning rod. And then I noticed this little Velcro thing. I opened it up thinking that it was like the other place to put a cleaning rod, and then the whole top section fell down and I realized that everything that I was looking for is actually in a hidden compartment up here. So what you'll find in here, of course, is a cleaning rod. You will find this little guy. It's a cleaning device for the wave part of the head joint. You basically stick the end with all the beads in it into the tube, feed it out the other end, and then pull on it and pull the fabric part through it, and the fabric part will absorb all of the moisture as it comes out the other end. They're calling it a bead swab because literally there are beads and it swabs out your flute. Yeah, okay. And then we have our polishing cloth. I love this one. I actually ordered this separately a long time ago to clean my glasses with. So for those of you who are watching this video who don't even play the flute, if you have anything you have to polish, iPad, phone screen, or whatever, get this cloth. It's the Jupiter microfiber polishing cloth. There's a cleaning gauze. The owner's manual is pretty darn cool. It goes over how to put the flute together. It also goes over the extension kit. I don't have time to show the extension kit in this video or else it's gonna be way too long, but there is actually an extension kit which extends the WE into a normal straight flute. So there's an extra barrel that you need to put in between your normal head joint and the rest of the flute because, again, right, the body itself has been truncated to make room for that waveline part of the head joint, so you have to put in an extra barrel. This manual goes over how to use it. Warranty information, and then the last thing that we will find is this guy, and I was like, whoa, what is this? It creates a lovely stand for you to put your Waveline flute to accommodate for the wavy part of the head joint. I think that's pretty cute, pretty useful. The other really interesting thing is that there's a handle on the side. I've never seen that before. It's super reinforced, so you can actually hold the case vertically. And then there's a super thick shoulder strap. I can see how this is really nicely placed because since it's placed like this, the flute will actually lay flat against your back. If you put it like on the side, it would stick out like that, and that's kind of weird. So they did it so that it would lay flat like this. And I like that. I like that they put that kind of thought into the design of this case. Truth be told, I've been waiting for a long time to ask for these to come in. The first time I saw it, I was so intrigued by it. What is this and how are they doing this and how does it sound? How does it feel? I'm gonna be totally honest here. This review is actually mostly for myself because I am really curious as to how these play. And speaking of playing, let's actually play around with these flutes. Your air air, the way it spins inside of your mouth, feels like a spinning disc. It doesn't matter if it's counterclockwise or clockwise, it's spinning in this general shape. So you do find you have to widen the chasm inside of your mouth quite a bit to accommodate this disc. Now, what happens to the air when it comes out of your mouth? It gets shot out from this spinning disc up to your top lip and then down. Your bottom lip is what helps redirect this whole airstream, because this whole airstream is pretty thick. Okay, so maybe that's a better representation of what it looks like. You push your lip up to angle the airstream higher, or you push it back a little bit to allow the air to go downwards some more. Your top lip doesn't really do much in terms of redirecting the air. Now, the really fun part for this is what happens to this spinning disc when you are traversing the registers. So the lower you go, the higher up this disc will be, but not all the way up to the roof of my mouth, maybe around here-ish. I still have at least a third of my mouth on the top here open. Now, if I want to play really high, in order to get the full resonance of the sound, I find that I have to push this whole disc down. You feel like it's almost down here instead. This creates a larger chasm inside of your mouth, which really helps get more air out, faster air out. In terms of where you really feel the air buzzing, you feel it mostly over here. Here is more of like, you have to sort of imagine that there is a CD there spinning. But in terms of where you really feel that resonance and that buzz, the rushing air, is right up here. So this means that this flute plays extremely forward. This sound is being produced like out here. There are some flutes that you feel that the sound is being produced somewhere around here instead, but that is not the case on this flute. So much so that you feel the flute itself vibrating along with you. You don't normally feel it as much on other flutes. I don't really know if it has something to do with the fact that it's shaped a little bit more interestingly with that wave. I don't know if it makes it vibrate differently. The whole thing, like even to the out here, like where that curvy bit of the head joint is, that whole area there is vibrating like crazy. It's a very, very interesting sensation. I'm also noticing that the head joint itself, at least like the tiny short part of it, needs to be rolled out quite a bit. Within the last 20-30 years or so, people have discovered that if you play more rolled out, your sound does actually project more. However, this head joint, for some reason, I find I need to roll it out just a tad more than I usually would on other flutes. And this is after trying quite a few other flutes. I don't know if it has to do with the fact that the tube itself is different and maybe it's responding differently. There are these like subtle differences that I feel. This is more of like a teacher beware type of thing when you're teaching your very young students who might have this flute. You have muscles right here. These two muscles are pulled down so much that this hole right here, even though it might still look like this, you know, if you look at it in the mirror, in terms of how it feels like this. The really nice thing about being so rolled out is that you project very, very easily. It seems to be built to be as easy to be played as possible, which also brings me to note that the embouchure hole itself tends to be a little bit square. Just looking at it right now, the hole itself looks like this. This is the part that is touching your lips. Then this is the part that's away from your lips. And then it kind of curves like this. This part and this part are very, very straight, exceedingly so, in fact. So that makes for a very free-flowing type of playing, because when your air hits these really straight spots, it just kind of goes straight into the flute. You don't really have to like finesse your way around it to get a really nice sound. It just kind of cuts it for you, basically. One more thing to note about this flute is that the sound generally has less depth than I would expect from a normal flute. I believe this is simply because it's a shorter tube. There's literally less space to vibrate. So again, this is just a quick note for teachers in case you are developing tone with a young student who is using this flute. Just know that their sound can only have so much depth. It's still a really, really nice sound. It's just that you can't get that depth that a longer tube would provide you. Now for harmonics. so easy to get the 5th harmonic on the D. Usually there's a crazy amount of resistance on a normal like C foot or B foot joint flute. I believe it is because it is such a shorter tube, so it makes playing high notes way easier because there's less tube to deal with. The really interesting thing was the 3rd and the 4th harmonic were actually the ones that were a little bit finicky. Usually those ones are the easy ones, but the 5th harmonic popped out really easily. So I feel like there's a shift in the responses of all of the harmonics because of the shorter tube. I think it does something different to the physics of the sound. I can really feel the difference. I was even able to hit the 7th harmonic on the D. I have never been able to do that on any flute. Trust me, I've tried, but you can get it out loud and proud on this flute. The shorter tube is so cool. Generally, I notice that the harmonics do speak very easily, so teachers out there, go ahead and teach your little student harmonics. One, I think it'll be really fun for them, like you can make it a game, and also it won't actually be that hard on them. In terms of the tone of the harmonics though, they're not as full as you would expect them on a normal length flute, and I do also believe it has to do with the fact that you just have less flute to work with. Now for tone color. For tone color, I find that all you have to do, it's very simple on this flute, is play with the width of the disc. If you have been watching my reviews for a while, I think you can probably predict what I'm going to say now. The richer, more full and resonant you want your tone to be, the wider you make that disc. Your embouchure, you know how before I said that it feels like this, right? When you are playing with a really resonant sound, even your embouchure hole is stretched out, so it feels like that. Now, the thinner you want your sound to be, the more you just kind of make it smaller. You do find that you kind of end up collapsing the sides of your mouth inward to accommodate the smaller size of this disc. I do find that the range of tone colors is quite small on this flute, but you can still get some differences. So a young student won't be super overwhelmed with starting to play with tone color. As you can see, you know, not much to it. It's very easy to describe this whole like disc inside of your mouth. Maybe a better description for really young kids would be like a DVD or a Blu-ray disc. Now let's play with the mechanism. Like I said, no trill keys, no B flat lever, no gizmo, so I can't play with those on this flute because they don't exist. But because they're not there, it makes the flute so light and so comfortable. Oh, amazing. For someone as small as me, I wish my normal flute was this comfortable and this light. The keys themselves have moderate resistance. I wouldn't say they're incredibly resistant, but I also wouldn't say they're very light either. They're sort of in the middle, maybe leaning a little more towards resistant. There's no crazy bounce back on any of the keys either, so it does make it easier to time your fingers correctly. This is really good for young developing students. Their fingers are still growing, their hands are still growing, which means that they have to adjust their flute playing as they grow. The flute won't be so responsive that it'll drive them up a wall. They won't feel like they have to start over literally from square one every single time they have to adjust. And now for articulation. We previously said that in terms of where you feel the air spinning and buzzing and vibrating against, your mouth, is right out here. So as you can imagine, your tonguing needs to follow suit. You'll find that if you're tonguing there, your tongue is going to sound really like heavy and it's gonna thump. This is typically what happens if you tongue too far back. Instead of doing that, I do what I call pseudo French tonguing. A true French tonguing, just to reiterate for those of you who are watching these videos for the first time, starts with your tongue out here and you end up going. So your tongue is literally between your lips. The tonguing on this flute is forward, but it's not as forward as true French tonguing. I find that my tongue is like this, with the bottom of my tongue kind of sticking out a little bit on the bottom edge of my tooth. If you tongue like this, you'll get a really clean articulation. Now let's talk about double tonguing. I'm not sure how many very, very, very little kids who are playing this flute will use double tonguing, but I tried it anyway, and it is exactly what I thought it would be because the tonguing is this far forward. Your tongue, when you do the K part of a double tongue, needs to be quite high up as well. I do like the way that I came up with last time to talk about this. It's the difference between pronouncing it as K and K. We tend to think of Ks, at least in North America, we go K, K. Our tongue is actually hitting all the way down here, right? But we don't want that on the flute because if you do that, it will actually swallow your sound. It's too close to where you are, shooting the air out from your throat. When you say K, you'll notice that your tongue hits way further up around here. You'll end up with a really nice, clean sound this way. And now for dynamics. Again, we have our CD, right? I'm imagining it is just getting bigger on all sides as much as possible. Your airstream, you really feel it mostly only on fortes, but you really feel like it's being spun out of this disc. It's hitting the roof of your mouth, and then it's being poured out like this. Like, you feel like it's a waterfall. For your fortes, everything gets bigger. Your embouchure itself gets bigger as well. Not only does it get wider like this, it actually also just gets bigger altogether. When you are playing piano, you basically do the opposite. So you make your CD as small as it can be. And quite honestly, I feel like it loses the waterfall effect entirely. You just kind of feel like there's a thin little line of air coming out, and that's it. It's just this thin little line. Your embouchure gets really tiny. It's the same shape. We're just playing with how wide it is, how small it is, how big it is. And now let's play around with the WE. I need to note to you guys that you are really working with the exact same head joint as on the WD. So the differences in the feeling of how it plays and the way it sounds has more to do with the fact that it is actually a full-size flute. It is a C-foot joint flute. But in terms of how you actually play it, it's pretty much exactly the same as the 700WD. What's the difference then? The difference is just simply more resonance. You get more depth of sound. The sound itself does not sound as shallow, and the flute itself you can feel vibrates more. You can even feel it under your fingers, and you can feel it against your lip. The whole thing is vibrating. And now for harmonics. We're now back in familiar territory. The harmonics actually respond in exactly the way that I would expect them to. The easier harmonics are actually easier, the harder harmonics are actually harder. I noticed that the harmonics themselves are naturally more full and more resonant than on the WD. I think it's just because you have more flute to work with. The 7th harmonic does pop out really, really easily. I am very, very pleasantly surprised. It's very loud and very proud. A lot of times on other flutes, that 7th harmonic can get a little bit thin. This one is just full. So you can tell that this flute is actually built to make the high register really easy to play. Now for tone color. really nothing you do different. Now the tone color that comes out on the WE simply has a bigger range. You can get more chocolatey, more rich, more luxurious with your sound. You can get even thinner with your sound. You can get a much more hollow tone on this flute. So if you're a teacher, what does that mean for your students? By the time they graduate to a WE, they will already know the techniques, but now the only difference is that their palette has been enlarged. And now for the mechanism. So on this flute, there are trill keys and the B flat lever and even a split E. There is no gizmo because this is a C foot joint. Gizmos are only used to cover the B key of a B foot joint. The trill keys have a really lovely bounce to them, but the rest of the keys have that same moderate resistance to them, including the B flat lever, I noticed. And now for articulation. The tonguing is exactly the same. Remember again, it's ta, ke. If you think te, it's a little bit too far back in your mouth, just as a side note. Okay, so ta will keep everything forward, ke will keep everything high up in your mouth. And last but not least, dynamics. Again, it's the same, you just have more range. The waterfall effect feels even more intense. The super tiny disc for the pianos can be even tinier. The more flute you have to work with, the more you can play around. All right, so now let's talk about how much these flutes cost. The Jupiter 700WD costs $609. The Jupiter 700WE costs $679. If you want the extension kit, that is an additional $219. All right, and that is it for my review. I hope you guys really enjoyed it. I think this flute is such a great advance in flute technology that is now available for young students to learn the flutes. This did not exist when I was a kid. I wish it did. Let us know in the comments below what other flutes you would like for me to review. Not only do I read them, but the Flute Center of New York reads them as well. Be sure to follow the Flute Center of New York on their Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I will put all the links to their social media down in the info box below. And as usual, if you like this video, make sure you give me a big thumbs up and hit subscribe for new videos every Saturday. My last video is over there. And if you want to catch me during the week, my social media networks are down there. But otherwise, I will see you guys next week. Bye. And then it creates a lovely... Sorry, I'm doing it upside down.